Good evening. In the first reading, we heard the story of the prophet Elisha, curing Naaman's leprosy. As it states, Naaman is the army commander of the king of Aram. The Arameans were in what today is called Syria. Remember, at this time, the Davidic kingdom was divided into two kingdoms. The northern kingdom was called Israel, and the southern kingdom was called Judah. The prophet Elisha, which means my God saves in Hebrew, was a prophet in the northern kingdom of Israel. Elisha instructs Naaman, go and wash 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will heal, and you will be clean. The number 7 was symbolic during those times, as it represented a sense of fullness or completeness. Naaman became upset and was not sure why the prophet would not just cure him at once. He knew that the Jordan River was a muddy and dirty river. Why could he not use the rivers from his homeland, which were filled with crystal clear water from the mountains above Damascus? His servants reasoned with him to do as the prophet asked. Naaman went down and plunged in the Jordan 7 times, and his flesh became clean. When we hear this last part, it reminds me of our culture today. We're always looking for the easy way out or instant gratification, rather than something extraordinary. God's plan may not always be the easy or ordinary way out. Sometimes we may have to do things the hard way to get the result that God has planned for us. Furthermore, when we think of cleansing in the Jordan, it brings us to John the Baptist, baptizing in the Jordan. The prophet Elisha not only sends Naaman down to be cleansed of leprosy, but I believe it suggests a type of baptism for him as well. You can look at this as a cleansing of both sins. One is his leprosy, and the other is his soul. Naaman is cleansed and becomes a believer in God of Israel, as he says in verse 15. Now, I know that there is no God in all the earth, except in Israel. Also, let's take notice to Naaman offering Elisha gifts. Elisha replied, as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not take it. Naaman says that he would like to take 2 mule loads of earth, and that he will no longer make burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except the Lord. What can we draw from that message? In those times, worshiping the Lord was associated with the soil of the Holy Land, Israel. Remember that God gave this land to his people. Therefore, they considered it holy and sacred. Lastly, in this story, Naaman asked to be excused from his duties of worship in the temple with his master, because that is what is required of him to do. Elisha replies, go in peace, meaning that he understands and approves of the situation. Remember, worshiping false gods is a sin. Elisha's healing of Naaman's leprosy is a foreshadowing of Jesus' healing of people with leprosy. In today's gospel, Luke tells us that Jesus is preaching in a synagogue at Nazareth. He is speaking about the prophets Elijah and Elisha, which correlates with Luke's emphasis of Jesus as a prophet during those times. The 2 stories that Jesus preaches about refer to how there was no one worth saving in Israel at the time except for 2 non-Israelites, the widow of Zarephath and Naaman the Syrian. We can gather from this that Jesus is trying to tell us that the people of Israel were not worthy of God's mercy and love during the time of those prophets. Furthermore, he was suggesting that the same thing of the people to which he was preaching to at that time, which in turn made them angry, and they drove Jesus out of the town. So in closing, if God can cleanse and show mercy on Naaman, then can't God do the same for us when we lose our trust and faith in him?